By 2026, the conversation around operating systems has quietly but decisively shifted. For decades, Windows was treated as the default choice, not because it was loved, but because it was everywhere. Schools taught it, offices depended on it, and most people never questioned it. Linux, on the other hand, was often framed as an alternative for developers, tinkerers, or power users. That framing no longer fits reality. In 2026, Linux is not just an alternative, it is, in many practical and philosophical ways, a better operating system than Windows for a growing number of people. This isn't about ideology or nostalgia. It's about how people actually use computers today, what they expect from their systems, and where technology is heading next. One of the most obvious reasons Linux stands out in 2026 is performance efficiency. Modern hardware is powerful, yet Windows continues to feel heavy, even on newer machines. Background services, telemetry processes, bundled features, and constant indexing all consume system resources whether you want them to or not. Linux, by contrast, gives you control over what runs and when it runs. Even beginner-friendly distributions now ship with lean defaults, and advanced users can strip their systems down to the essentials. This means faster boot times, smoother multitasking, and better responsiveness, especially on older or mid-range hardware. In 2026, with electronic waste becoming a global concern and hardware prices fluctuating, the ability to extend the life of a computer is no longer a niche benefit. Linux lets a 5-year-old laptop feel new again, while Windows often pushes users toward upgrades simply to maintain acceptable performance. Closely tied to performance is stability, an area where Linux has continued to quietly dominate. Windows updates are infamous for breaking workflows, resetting settings, or introducing unexpected bugs at the worst possible times. In professional environments, a forced update at the wrong moment can cost hours of productivity. Linux's update model is fundamentally different. You choose when to update, what to update, and in many cases, whether to update at all. In 2026, immutable and atomic Linux systems have matured significantly, offering near-unbreakable operating systems where updates are applied safely and can be rolled back instantly if something goes wrong. This level of reliability is no longer limited to servers. It is available on everyday desktops and laptops. For users who depend on their machines for work, content creation, or study, this predictability is a major advantage. Another reason Linux is better than Windows in 2026 is control over your own system. Windows increasingly feels like a service rather than a tool. Settings are scattered, some options are hidden or locked away, and many behaviors cannot be fully disabled without workarounds or registry hacks. Linux operates on a fundamentally different philosophy. The system belongs to you. If you want to change how something works, you usually can. Desktop environments allow deep customization, from workflow behavior to visual design, without resorting to unsupported hacks. This sense of ownership matters more in 2026 than ever before, as people grow more aware of how much of their digital lives are shaped by opaque decisions made by corporations. Linux doesn't assume it knows better than you. It gives you choices. Privacy is another area where the gap between Linux and Windows has become impossible to ignore. Windows continues to collect telemetry data by default, often with limited transparency about what is being collected and why. While some of this data can be reduced, it is rarely eliminated entirely. In an era where data has become one of the most valuable commodities in the world, many users are no longer comfortable with this arrangement. Linux distributions, especially those driven by community governance, do not have the same incentives to harvest user data. In 2026, privacy-focused Linux distributions offer sensible defaults that respect user autonomy without requiring constant vigilance. Even mainstream Linux desktops now make it easy to understand what is happening under the hood, giving users confidence that their operating system is not quietly watching them. Security is often cited as a Linux advantage, but by 2026, the reason Linux is safer than Windows goes beyond simple malware statistics. Linux's security model is built around clear permission boundaries, transparency, and rapid community response. Software is typically installed from trusted repositories rather than random executable files downloaded from the web. This drastically reduces the attack surface for everyday users. When vulnerabilities are discovered, fixes are often deployed quickly across distributions. Windows, meanwhile, remains a primary target for malware due to its market share and legacy design decisions. Even with improvements like built-in antivirus tools, Windows still relies heavily on reactive security. Linux's proactive design, combined with its open development process, makes it fundamentally harder to compromise in meaningful ways. Software management is another area where Linux feels more modern in 2026. Despite having pioneered many of these ideas decades ago, package managers once seen as intimidating have become user-friendly and powerful. Installing, updating, and removing software is often faster and cleaner on Linux than on Windows. There is no hunting for installers, no worrying about bundled adware, and no cluttered system registry slowly accumulating debris. Universal packaging formats like Flatpak and Snap have matured, solving many of the compatibility issues that once plagued Linux desktops. Users can run the latest versions of applications without sacrificing system stability. Compared to Windows, where software installation still feels fragmented and inconsistent, Linux offers a cohesive experience that simply makes sense. Customization and personalization are also areas where Linux surpasses Windows in 2026. Windows offers limited customization that often changes or disappears with major updates. Linux, on the other hand, treats customization as a first-class feature. Whether you prefer a traditional desktop, a macOS-like experience, a tiling window manager, or something entirely unique, Linux can adapt to your preferences. This isn't just about aesthetics. Workflow customization allows users to optimize their environment for productivity, creativity, or accessibility. In 2026, as people increasingly rely on computers for diverse tasks ranging from remote work to content creation, having an environment that adapts to you rather than forcing you to adapt to it is a significant advantage. Cost is another practical reason Linux continues to outshine Windows. Linux itself is free, but the real benefit goes beyond the price tag. There are no activation keys, no licensing restrictions, and no feature tiers that lock essential functionality behind paywalls. This matters not only to individuals but also to schools, small businesses, and developing regions where software costs can be a real barrier. In 2026, as subscription models become more common across the tech industry, Linux stands out as a reminder that powerful software doesn't have to come with recurring fees. The freedom to install Linux on as many machines as you want, for any purpose, without legal or financial concerns, is something Windows simply cannot match. The Linux ecosystem in 2026 is also far more polished and accessible than many people realize. For years, critics argued that Linux was not ready for everyday users due to poor hardware support or lack of popular software. That argument has steadily lost credibility. Hardware manufacturers increasingly provide Linux drivers out of the box, and compatibility layers have made running Windows applications and games more viable than ever. Gaming on Linux, once a punchline, is now a legitimate option thanks to advances in compatibility technologies and native support from major platforms. Creative professionals can access powerful open-source tools or run proprietary software through compatibility layers with minimal friction. The idea that Linux is only for developers no longer reflects reality. Another reason Linux is better than Windows in 2026 is the pace and direction of innovation. Windows development is constrained by the need to maintain backward compatibility with decades of legacy software. This often results in awkward compromises and half measures. Linux, while also valuing compatibility, is more willing to evolve. New display servers, improved audio systems, modern file systems, and container-based workflows have all matured significantly by 2026. These changes are not just theoretical improvements. They directly enhance the user experience. Linux feels like an operating system that is moving forward with purpose, rather than one trying to balance the weight of its past with the demands of its future. Community and transparency are also key advantages. Linux is not developed behind closed doors by a single corporation with opaque priorities. It is shaped by a global community of developers, users, and organizations. This doesn't mean Linux is chaotic or directionless. On the contrary, the diversity of perspectives often leads to more robust and thoughtful design decisions. When problems arise, discussions are public. When changes are proposed, they are debated. In 2026, as trust in large tech companies continues to erode, this openness becomes increasingly valuable. Users are not just consumers. They are participants in an ecosystem that respects their intelligence and agency. Linux also excels in adaptability across different devices and use cases. The same underlying system powers everything from servers and supercomputers to desktops, laptops, and embedded devices. This consistency matters in a world where people increasingly move between different computing environments. Skills learned on one Linux system often transfer directly to another. Windows, while versatile, remains primarily focused on the desktop experience, with other versions often feeling disconnected. Linux's ability to scale up or down without losing its identity is a quiet but powerful advantage in 2026. Another important point is longevity and future-proofing. When you install Windows, you are implicitly agreeing to Microsoft's timeline. When support ends, you are encouraged or forced to upgrade, even if your hardware is still perfectly functional. Linux distributions handle this differently. Long-term support releases can remain viable for many years, and even when official support ends, the community often continues maintenance. This gives users greater control over their upgrade cycles and reduces unnecessary hardware turnover. In a world increasingly aware of sustainability, this approach matters. Linux also encourages learning and understanding, rather than hiding complexity behind glossy interfaces. This doesn't mean Linux is difficult to use, it means it is honest. Users who want to learn more about how their system works are not discouraged or blocked. Over time, this builds confidence and digital literacy. In 2026, as technology becomes more intertwined with daily life, understanding the tools we rely on is empowering. Windows, by contrast, often obscures its inner workings, making users dependent rather than informed. The philosophy behind Linux is another reason it stands out. Linux is built on principles of freedom, collaboration, and respect for users. These principles influence everything from licensing to design decisions. While Windows is ultimately guided by corporate strategy and shareholder interests, Linux is guided by a broader set of values. This doesn't make Linux perfect, but it does make it fundamentally different. For many users in 2026, that difference matters more than ever. Interoperability is yet another advantage. Linux plays well with other systems and standards. It excels in mixed environments where different operating systems and platforms need to coexist. Open standards are not an afterthought. They are a core strength. This makes Linux an excellent choice for professionals who work across multiple ecosystems. Windows, while improving in this area, often prioritizes its own services and formats, creating friction where Linux offers flexibility. Finally, there is the simple fact that Linux feels like it respects your time. It doesn't nag you to sign into an account. It doesn't interrupt your work with forced updates. It doesn't push unwanted features or services. In 2026, as digital fatigue becomes a real phenomenon, this calm, respectful approach is refreshing. Linux gets out of your way and lets you focus on what you actually want to do. Taken together, these reasons paint a clear picture. Linux in 2026 is faster, more stable, more private, more secure, more customizable, and more respectful of users than Windows. It is not just an operating system for enthusiasts or professionals. It is a practical, modern choice for anyone who wants control, transparency, and longevity from their technology. The question is no longer whether Linux is ready for everyday users. The question is how long people will continue to accept the limitations of an operating system that increasingly feels out of step with their needs, when a better option has been quietly improving right in front of them.